What's up, everybody? Welcome to the NESN Red Sox Podcast, where we're going to talk about, if you can believe it or not, the Red Sox. Maybe we'll touch on the Bruins, Celtics, and Patriots every now and then. Who knows? We'll do whatever we want. But just so you know, I'm Ricky Doyle. I'm joined by Dakota Randall.
That's me.
And we're gonna make this a regular thing here, Dakota. We're gonna talk Red Sox every now and then, touch up on some big topics, give our sizzling takes of the week. And we'll just kind of go from there. This is a good time to, it's still early in the season, so we're still kind of in the setting the table, so to speak, for the year.
Right, the home opener hasn't come yet. So
yeah, so
a lot of people, that's the unofficial.
So I figure what we'll do is we can kind of come up with some takeaways from the first two series of the Red Sox so far, and then get into just kind of a bigger picture approach as well, because there's a lot to sink your teeth into with this team so far.
Yeah, definitely. And we're also going to have an interview with Tom Caron,
yes,
one of the voices of the Red Sox.
Yes,
here
TC has agreed to talk some Red Sox with us as well. So bring him in, unique perspective. Obviously, you haven't dealt with a whole bunch of Red Sox teams over the years, so he'll certainly be able to provide some insight as to how this team compares to teams in years past. Interesting, too, with the Alex Cora connection, just the fact that, he covered him as a broadcaster, and now covered him when Cora was a player as a broadcaster, and now obviously Cora being the manager of the Red Sox. So just kind of how he views that situation. I think it's an interesting take to get from TC.
Right. Among all people that are around the team a lot, I think he's among the most qualified to talk about Cora. He's kind of seen him come full circle a bit, so yeah, it'll be great to talk to him, see what he has to say. Excellent.
So let's just let's start off, I guess, by kind of diving into these first two series of the season against two, I think you could call them bad teams.
You can call them terrible teams.
Yeah, you could borderline terrible. That Marlins opening day lineup, not to go off on a tangent here, but their first game against the Cubs was something special.
Well,
it was a special sight.
And they were surprisingly competitive in that series, but I think what surprised me is that it's even worse than I think many people expected it to be for Derek Jeter. They set the record for the lowest attendance in that ballpark's history in the second game of the season with 10,000 people.
Yeah.
So it's pretty ugly now.
Well, they were all coming back down to earth after watching Ace Jose Urena on the mound. So, all right. So let's get into this. Obviously, as you mentioned, not a huge sample size to go off of. So a lot of what we'll be talking about will be based on just the bigger picture for the 2018 season, maybe even beyond that. I mean, we'll see how things go here. But I do want to stress that you can't take away too much. But
especially with the fact that, it's Tampa and Miami.
It is. And so that's why I wanted to point out that this is also, not only is it a small sample size, but it's a small sample size against garbage teams.
Yeah.
So, again, we take everything with a grain of salt. That said, what has kind of stood out to you so far? What's your biggest takeaway? Because I got a few things I'd like to rattle off.
Well, for me, I think the one takeaway that you can get from these first 5 games, it's hard to watch them and get a gauge on if the offense is going to be better or worse, or if the pitching is going to be better or worse. But one thing that's stood out to me is the vibe around the team. Just the sort of impression I get from the team. It doesn't feel entirely different at all from where it was last season. It feels like, to me, almost an exact continuation from the team that we saw last season. And that's for better or worse, because, on one hand you could say, well, a lot of people thought this team needed to really switch things up after getting bounced in the first round of the playoffs in consecutive seasons. But on the other hand, you can say, hey, they're the same team as the one that won back-to-back AL East titles.
Yeah.
So there's ways to look at it, and obviously there's a lot of time for this team to take on a new identity, with a new manager, a younger manager. As the season progresses, I suspect, kind of the youth and energy that he brings in there, you'll start to see it permeate throughout the clubhouse a bit more. And if someone like JD Martinez pans out, that can have a trickle-down effect on the lineup if they really start producing. But for me, and it's hard for me to tell if this is a bad thing or good thing yet, but my biggest takeaway is that it just really doesn't feel like a team that's vastly different from the one that we just saw in October.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think it's magnified, too, when you consider, the splashy offseason that the Yankees had. I mean, when it's juxtaposed with your biggest rival going out and getting, one of the most feared hitter, if not the most feared hitter in baseball, and then you sit there and, obviously they bring in JD Martinez later in the spring, but for a long time it was just kind of a staring contest between Dave Dombrowski and Scott Boras. I think everybody felt like it was inevitable they were going to add JD Martinez, but you just kind of sat there and wondered, is this team going to do anything? And then even after the fact, I think the whole, there was the initial buzz surrounding it, but getting JD Martinez was kind of like a slow build. You almost felt like this was going to come at some point, so it wasn't all of a sudden. It wasn't the Stanton move where you went out and you surprised everybody by adding that big bat out of nowhere. It was pretty clear. And I think this speaks to how Dave Dombrowski's kind of operated since he's been in charge of the Red Sox, is that it's pretty clear that he identifies the weakness and he goes out and he gets it in really just a kind of a predictable manner, for better or worse. It just, I think the Kimbrel, going back to the Kimbrel trade, I mean, it was pretty obvious that they needed to make a move there. It just, it's pretty easy to kind of see what is forthcoming from this team. So then when they go ahead and they do make that move, they bring in JD Martinez. It is, like you said, a very just not a huge buzz. And again, it's for better or worse, as you mentioned.
Right, and I think we can debate about whether all of Dombrowski's moves have panned out. I mean, obviously some of them haven't. Tyler Thornburg, case in point. But I think you're right in saying that, if nothing else, you definitely can give him credit for every time the team has an apparent need, he definitely goes out and makes a move in an attempt to fill it. I mean,
whether it be off season or in season.
Right. When he first got there, we knew we needed another starting pitcher, someone to lead the staff, and he got David Price. And then obviously when with Price's health kind of up in the air, we went and got another starter in Chris Sale. When we thought the bullpen was a weakness, made the trade for Carson Smith, made the trades with Tyler Thornburg. Craig Kimbrel, obviously, to fill a closer role. So every time the Red
Eduardo
Sox...
Nunez, Addison Reed, I mean, the list goes on.
Right. And like you said, in-season moves to fill the need. And, so he definitely identifies the needs and goes out and executes those deals. But to go back to the thing about how it feels like the same team, I think for me, the big thing that made it feel that way, and for a lot of Red Sox fans, is, it's game one of the season, and you already get Matt Barnes and Joe Kelly. And for me, I feel for a lot of people, the
optics of it.
Yeah,
it just felt like. Yeah. And it's kind of my biggest issue with the offseason in general, is they did, as we've touched on, went out and filled what you could argue was the biggest need in getting a guy, a middle of the order bat, JD Martinez. But I would have liked to have seen him address that bullpen, specifically get a left-hander. I think it would have been nice if they could have added a veteran left-hander. I know, like, Tony Watson was a guy that was kind of kicked around. Like, not saying go out and get him, but somebody of that like.
Right.
I just would have liked to have seen them bring in another arm. I think this team is relying a lot, and maybe too much. This could ultimately be to their detriment, on internal progression. Guys taking steps forward, bouncing back from last year, and I think it's a reasonable expectation. But again, I think it's also asking a lot, specifically when you're talking about young guys, Andrew BennettND, Rafael Devers, guys like that, that are, you could make the case that are somewhat wild cards coming into the season. So,
right, that are still largely unproven.
Yes,
I mean, they proved themselves in 1 year, but we still don't know. And same thing, like you said, with the bullpen. I think, for a lot of fans, sort of the symbols of this kind of iffy bullpen over the last few years, or sort of this uneasiness with the pitching staff, two of the symbols have been Matt Barnes and Joe Kelly. And to see both of them pitch opening day, and especially to see Kelly at the center of that of the Rays comeback, I think that just kind of made a lot of people feel like it was the same team. But I think it's important to remember that if everything goes right and as according to plan, I don't think either of those two guys will be getting the late innings as the season progresses. I mean, that should be Carson Smith and that should be Tyler Thornburg. So, like I said, right now it feels like the same team, but as the year progresses, it could take on a new identity, and the later innings could look vastly different than they have the last couple seasons.
Yeah, you also don't know, too, it is such a long season, so there is that, there could come points that, there inevitably are going to be points where some, people point to certain games as like signature, quote-unquote signature wins, right. Or, if the bench is clear in a game, you could point to that as sort of a galvanizing moment. I just feel like over the course of a season, there are so many of those little things that have come up. There's inevitably going to be, brush fires that Alex Cora is going to have to put out at some point.
Right.
So there's a lot of developments, but I agree with you. On the surface, going into the season, the feel is not that much different. And again, it's for better or worse, because you are talking about a team that is coming off back-to-back division titles, but Clearly, when you start looking around the rest of the American League, they're still a step behind, I think. They're still playing a little catch-up. So it almost sometimes you don't necessarily want to make changes for the sake of change, but certainly there's got to be something internally that happens to kind of have this team take that next step.
Yeah, and like you said, with these sort of season-defining moments. We even had them last season. How many extra inning walk-off wins did they have last year? They seem to happen every week. Yet, and so the season's progressing, and fans are
This could also be those moments can be overblown too.
Exactly.
I still think back to 2012, Cody Ross hitting a walk-off home run, and people were like, "This is the night the Red Sox became a team."
Right.
Like, no, they still suck. That still was a terrible team, and we should have known that in the moment, and in hindsight, it's even more apparent. But
right.
So I guess what I'm saying is don't get too caught up in those things.
Exactly, and as we saw, they had all those great moments last year, and everyone's thinking, "Oh, great, these young guys, they never say die, they battle back." But then when push comes to shove in the playoffs, when you're facing really good teams and it's about matchups, who has the better team, we saw what happened. So like you said, hopefully, these guys progress internally, and that's the next step that they end up taking. But we'll find out. Long way to go.
Kind of going off of that, I think one of my biggest takeaways is it seems to me that Alex Cora does have sort of a long-term vision or a long-term approach, even just throughout the early portion of the season. Some of the comments he made in spring training about we're going to give guys some rest early on, and this is a long season, and you might not see guys have the same amount of plate appearances and in totality as you would in previous years, and it's kind of come to the forefront early. We've seen. J.D. Martinez was sitting in the 5th game of the season. Granted, it was after playing back-to-back games in left field, but I think he's going to make a concerted effort to not run guys into the ground, to get them some rest. You look at Chris Sale, 92 pitches over 6 innings on opening day. He matched or surpassed that in all but 1 start last season. So I think that it's pretty clear they're going to try to not run him into the ground again, which probably is a good idea.
Right. Yeah. No, go on.
No, but I just think across the board, you've seen some of that where he is taking into account the bigger picture approach of, we have a pretty deep bench. You got to, even when somebody like Dustin Pedroia comes back, I still think you're going to see a lot of Eduardo Nunez, whether it's spelling Pedroia or getting Devers off his feet for a day.
Right.
I think you're going to see Blake Swihart have an opportunity to justify carrying him on the roster in general.
Right. And for those people listening that don't understand, I am the self-proclaimed president of the Blake Swihart fan club. You are. Nothing would make me happier than to see Blake Swihart start.
There was about a 3-week stretch where you came in the office every day. You came in the office starting with debates, and you finished your day with debates. It was it was quite a whirlwind.
Right. And at this point, I don't have too much of a reason for why I have such a thing for Blake Swihart, but I don't know. I'd love to see the guy get more playing time. That's all I can really say about it.
Well, if he does, I think that's going to be really an effort to safeguard against. Just look at what happened last season. This team, this kind of become a theme in Boston sports in general, just being ravaged by injuries. Look, last season, Mookie had a little bit of a wrist issue. Mitch Moreland dealing with the foot.
Obviously,
Xander Bogaerts. His season went into a tailspin after he got hit on the hand. Hanley Ramirez had the shoulder issue. Dustin Pedroia, obviously. So, and that's not even taking into account the workload that Chris Sale had, and Craig Kimbrell. You kind of got to manage his innings, I would imagine, a little bit. You don't want to run him out there every day. So, I think you're going to see a lot of these guys. You're going to see different lineups every day. I think you got a pretty firm foundation of what the optimal lineup is, but how often you see that is going to be interesting, especially when you consider too that J.D. Martinez is going to play a little bit of the outfield. He's not just going to be the DH that everybody kind of assumed when they went out and got him.
Right, and I think you said he's got a long-term approach, and what I think is kind of interesting and kind of a catch-22 early on is in his attempt, and by him I mean Alex Cora, in his attempt to sort of push this long-term view of pulling out the starters early, managing their innings, resting them. He creates some tricky situations in the short term. So in trying to manage for the future, he kind of creates some tough spots in the immediate.
Tuffy.
Yeah, all toughy. I don't know what that word is. It's some tough spots in the immediate, and we saw some questionable bullpen moves in the first few games. some of them, it's hard to question bullpen moves, so early on. We don't know how guys are going to pitch and everything, but in bringing putting innings limits on some of these guys, you go to your bullpen earlier, and then the onus is on the manager to make sure he makes the right calls. So we'll find out as the season progresses if he's ready to make those.
It's one of those things that, I mean, it could just balance itself out over time. I mean, it's almost in some ways it's like you plug one hole in a boat, and then all of a sudden another hole opens up. It's like one of those cartoons where you plug a hole in a boat, and then all of a sudden another hole opens up. So you just gotta kind of pick your spots, because I also don't want to, if you're the Red Sox, you also don't want to get into a situation where you're kind of, I don't want to say punting games in April or May, but you're rolling out lineups that you're not your typical everyday lineup for the sake of being healthy in September or in October, and then kind of setting yourself up for a more difficult September or October by not winning games that you should be winning now. Because I mean, you look at the schedule the first month, this is an opportunity for the Red Sox to get out to a hot start, get out on the right foot. They get a pretty we've already mentioned the week schedule to come right out of the gate, but just overall, April is a huge opportunity for this team to get ahead and just kind of set the tempo for the season. So you don't want to set yourself back a little bit by whether it's not getting guys the at bats that they need to hit the ground running here.
Yeah, I agree. And like you said, with plugging one hole and then having to fill another one, I just think that, and as the season goes on, where managers really make their money is with I think in two areas. One, managing the bullpen and sort of making the right calls of the lineup. And he's got a tricky job here. It's not an easy task because the Red Sox have a lot of talent, a lot of guys that can hit on the major league level, and a lot of good arms in the bullpen. And but like you said, those problems shouldn't really. I think you have the benefit of an easier schedule early on, where he can kind of have a few weeks to figure this out, sort of get the ball rolling and get a strategy going. And then, like you said, as the season goes on, I don't think fans want to see Chris Sale getting pulled with 70 pitches against the Yankees in July,
right,
for the sake of managing for September. Those are the games against the Yankees, against other potential playoff teams, where you got to imagine they'll kind of throw that stuff to the wayside and say, let's give them our best shot.
I'm kind of curious as to, if you're Alex Cora, as a former utility guy, a guy who, made his bread and butter off of being the guy to spell the stars and come in and play all over the infield and just give guys days off. Whether having
a soft spot for him.
Yeah, well, I don't want to say a soft spot, but have kind of a little bit of a different perspective in terms of the importance of it, and not overlooking a guy like Blake Swihart, or I mean, just in general.
It's a good point. I didn't think about that.
Whether he had that, because that was really probably the number one storyline of spring training, aside from bringing in J.D. Martinez, because the lineup was pretty set, the rotation was pretty set. So it really, like, the only thing that was up in the air was who was going to win that utility battle. When you had several guys, obviously Devin Marrero was the one that ended up getting shipped out to Arizona.
Swihart got sent down.
And Swihart getting sent down. Kind of just a redundant situation in general, but and just the lack of options, minor league options for Blake Swihart obviously being a huge factor. But I just wonder what kind of perspective Cora had on that whole thing, and just whether, as a former utility guy, if he can kind of empathize or sympathize with these guys' situation, or just, like I said, realize the importance of these guys over the course of playing 162 games in a 186-day window or whatever it is.
Right. I think actually it's a great point, because as a former utility player, and he was an effective utility player, maybe he has a better idea of, okay, this is too many games for this guy to sit, or this is how many times he's got to get in there before he just rust becomes a factor. This might be too much of a weird position change for him. So hopefully, I imagine he has a good handle, or a good idea of how that all works out. And that could be huge with managing a guy like Blake Swihart, who right now is without a position and is on this team, like you said, one, because he was without options, but two, I mean, his bat. He earned a spot on the team in spring training, and he's kind of a square peg in a round hole. but his bat is good enough to be on the major league team, we think. So it's on Cora to kind of figure out how are we going to put this guy out there.
I am really anxious to see how they use him over the long haul. You know what I mean? It's just
a guy with no batting gloves.
Well, that's
no batting gloves. Full
that's
sleeve
usually
tattoos.
the beginning of your argument. So I imagine you're a big Sam Travis guy.
The big Sam Travis guy. We'll get to him later. I was a big Doug Mirabelli guy. Enormous.
That's what we call a tease.
Right. Enormous Vlad Guerrero guy. So guys with no batting gloves, I'm all for.
Well,
not to mention switch hitting catchers with gap power to both fields, and good speed.
Excellent.
I don't know his skill set. I understand how good Christian Vasquez is behind the plate. I know pitchers love pitching to him, but for me, now that Sandy Leon isn't even Chris Sale's personal catcher, now that Christian Vasquez is catching him, I just wonder if by season's end we'll see, maybe it's time to finally let Swihart get some appearances back there. I'm not saying trade Leon or something, but why not give the kid a shot and see what he can do behind the dish?
Well, I'm impressed because we're 15 minutes into the season or whatever we have, however deep we're into this thing, and you already managed to reference Vlad Guerrero and Doug Mirabelli in the same sentence. So going off that,
is there a Red Sox fan who goes throughout the day without thinking of Doug Mirabelli once?
Here's a quick story for you. I was at a fundraiser last week or 2 weeks ago, and one of the items up for auction was in fact a Doug Mirabelli autographed 8x10.
Wow. Not bad.
And I'd be lying if I told you I didn't put in for it. And I'd also be lying if I told you I didn't win it. I didn't win it. I thought
How much did it go for?
It was like so you got raffle tickets and you put them in like it's like a bag in front of it.
Okay.
And then you call out the number at the end. And I really thought that I had gone to the market on this thing. I thought for sure I was leaving that place with a little memento to put on my mantle. And
you wonder if there's like
struck out.
You wonder if there's a piece of Doug Mirabelli memorabilia out there that's worth like $15. Like, does it exist? Is there anything like maybe it's like, maybe it's a piece from like the taxi cab that he rode in on like
his
the famous
receipt,
or here's the cab ticker from the cab that brought Doug Mirabelli to Fenway the day they acquired him. Who was the catcher that couldn't catch Wakefield? Wasn't
Josh Bard.
Josh Bard, yeah, couldn't catch Wakefield. So
I think he went on to hit like 3-something. I think he had a big season for the Padres.
Yeah.
I could be making that up, but who the hell knows? Anyway, so let's move on a little bit here, and so we kind of gave our takeaways. But what's one good thing? Let's play a little good thing, bad thing as we progress through this here. What have you seen so far that you liked that has stood out about the Red Sox?
For me, I'd say, and again, it's really hard to tell because the lineups for the Rays and the Marlins are atrocious. I think is an easy way to put it. I think they each only have like one or two hitters that you really could say like are big league ready hitters.
Yeah. Real quick, what are your thoughts on the Marlins, man?
On the Marlins?
The Marlins Man.
Oh, the Marlins Man? I think he's a fraud.
Good.
I mean, what was the story?
I hate that guy.
What was it? The Tiger? He wants to go to the Tigers, or he's offering to take his fandom somewhere else?
He's treating himself. It's so like over the top. His little like shtick is so over the top that it makes you think that that's what it is.
Well, it's just this misplaced sense of self-importance. Like you think you're so integral to a franchise that honestly is a joke.
Yeah.
That means you're integral to the joke.
Treating himself as a free agent of fans, and I mean the guy has got. How about money coming out of his ears? So you'd like to keep that guy around as a season ticket holder, but at the same time, if I'm Derek Jeter, I'm telling you to kick rocks, pal.
Yeah, like, do you think Jeter was in the wrong? Because what is it? Marlins Man wanted to pay in advance for season tickets 3 years down the road.
3 years down the road, wrote a check for $200,000, I think it was.
And Jeter told him to screw.
And it had the audacity to say I've been supporting this team for however many years, and I've never. Basically implying that he deserves some sort of preferential treatment or doesn't deserve to be kicked to the curb, in which case I would argue that him spending all this time and money and just overall resources on the Marlins is more an indictment on him. Just maybe he should find another hobby. I know that he's got he sometimes has some friends at these seats, but it's just if that's the hill you're going to die on. As the
Marlins,
the
Marlins,
Marlins aficionado, and for some reason act like you've been wronged by an organization that has been just notorious for having fire sales over the years. I mean, what did you expect? I mean, you should know. Is this?
And like you said,
this isn't the first time the Marlins have blown things up. I mean, you look at their 2 World Series victories. The turnaround was pretty steep. You know, they got rid of some pieces very quickly. So Marlins Man should know more than anybody.
Do you think the Red Sox have any sort of fan that is around that status? The only one I can think of is Dennis Drinkwater.
Yeah,
who we would be sad
legend.
to see him go.
Yeah, absolute legend.
Yeah.
But you know, they don't really have, there's not a.
But like you said, it's the reason the Marlins Man looks so bad is, I mean, dude, like you said, you're dying on the hill of being the Marlins aficionado.
Yeah,
I mean, who cares?
I got some issues with that guy. But anyways, that was a huge tangent.
Like you said, I think we were talking about how bad the Marlins are.
Yeah. Anyways, so.
Well, you know, and the thing, what I was thinking last night while I was watching that game, and there was like 1,000 fans in the stands, and the Marlins are just terrible. Is I thought, you know, everyone makes fun of them right now, but everyone was saying the same stuff about the Kansas City Royals 6 years ago. Same stuff about the Houston Astros in 2012. You know, they're the laughing stock. They're losing 100 games. Everyone was like, wow, there's no way, you know, they're ever going to get back to being contenders. And, you know, who knows? In a couple of years, the Marlins might be right back. And then it'll be one of those things where you go, wow, remember how bad it was in 2018? So, you know, right now, yeah, they're miserable. And but that said, I mean, it doesn't look like they're just laying down. I mean, they were competitive against the Cubs. They tried.
All right, let's bring us back to the Red Sox. We didn't talk about the Marlins enough.
That's true. Yeah,
I mean, listen, I'd love to get your thoughts on the Marlins.
Let's spend 5 minutes on the most uninteresting team
But
in
let's bring it
baseball.
back to the Red Sox. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I think we originally were talking about one good thing.
Yeah.
And one more thing about the Marlins.
Oh, thank God.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, so the starting pitching, I think, absolutely needs to be, you know, it's the biggest positive for me. And again, like we said, it's hard to tell from the Rays and the Marlins, but if nothing else, you know, I think starting rotation depth is huge for any team. I mean, we saw how many starts, I mean, I can't remember his name right now, last year. The veteran starter that came in for the Sox, pitched towards the end of the season.
Doug Fister.
Doug Fister, yeah. And we saw how big it was to have, you know, to have some sort of rotation depth in case guys get hurt, and the Red Sox have some pitchers that have injury history. So to know that guys like Brian Johnson and Hector Velasquez can come in, albeit against bad lineups, but, you know, look like they belong, look like they're not scared of the moment, I think is huge. And then, you know, of course, I think David Price was really encouraging with his first game. You know, he looked stronger. Doesn't look like he's feeling sort of any issues with that elbow. You know, there was good life to his fastball. I thought he was pretty good. You know, I think it's the first 5 games of the season, the starters have given up 1 run or less. I know the last game against Tampa, when it was Velasquez that gave up 1 run, there was a stat that this is the first time since like 1907 that the Red Sox starters have given up 1 or fewer runs in the first 4 games. So obviously that record's only getting better.
Right.
So I mean, at some point you have to give them credit for it because, you know, what they're doing is historic, no matter how bad the competition is.
Now, I can't wait to see what they do when, and if and when. I mean, a lot could happen. Obviously, guys are going down with injuries all the time across the league. But assuming everyone is healthy, what that rotation looks like. I mean, I think that you probably, you know, you obviously get the top 3 and Sale, Price, and Porcello. And then I think you're probably looking at Pomeranz, Rodriguez to round it out,
right.
In which case you have Brian Johnson and Stephen Wright both in the bullpen, who neither of which is an ideal fit. It's
right.
a weird fit for the bullpen. Both guys out of minor league options, so you're a little bit hamstrung there. So they're going to have some decisions to make.
Right. I mean, I guess the easy decision is. I
mean, Velasquez, we can agree, is going to be down.
Right.
And yeah. And
unless he's pitching really well, and then, like, what do? Do you send him down? I don't think the Red Sox look like a team that wants to carry 2 lefties. I think the game's kind of trending away from that, too. I think they want 1 lefty specialist. And if Pointer's pitching really well, I mean, what do you do with Brian Johnson?
See, Brian Johnson just seems like like I've always viewed him as just, I think he could evolve into a really good number 5 guy.
Right.
You know, what you got in his first start was probably, you know, better than I would expect. But I think he's a guy that can give you some meaningful innings, which is incredibly valuable over the course of a season. You mentioned Doug Fister. I would actually have liked to see the Red Sox maybe bring in another guy into their organization like that.
I agree.
And I'm not ruling it out. They might at some point. They got Fister in the middle of last season. So
How about Bartolo Colon?
You might you laugh now. But
we tried that one time in what, like 2010 or something.
You laugh now. Hey, I know. And I thought he was done at that point. I thought he was cooked, but. The world works in mysterious ways. So maybe they bring Bach back into the system at some point when he's on like his 9th team this year. But I would have liked to have seen them get somebody like that. But just going back to the whole Johnson-Wright thing, I'm just interested to see how they figure those two guys into their plans, because they are just, Stephen Wright is showing a versatility that's really kind of unmatched in the organization, you could argue.
Right.
And, I think that he'd probably be comfortable sticking him in the bullpen, but I always felt weird about having a knuckleballer in the bullpen anyways. It's just, I don't know, those two guys just don't.
Do you want that in a big inning?
Yeah, those two guys just don't seem like great fits for the pen. At this point, it looks like that's what it's going to be.
And for me, it's like if either one goes, in addition to being, if Johnson goes, he's kind of a lefty specialist, but both those guys also would be the long men. And you can't carry 2 long men in the bullpen, can you?
Yeah.
I can't imagine.
Especially the way the game is now.
Yeah, and for me, I just am not about the knuckleball. I mean, aside from Tim Wakefield, he was great, but outside of him, it's hard for me to trust someone that throws that as a primary pitch. And for me, I've always liked Brian Johnson because there's something about pitchers that are used to being effective, working at 88 or 89 miles per hour, that. I mean, for one, you never have to worry about how they're going to be if their velocity drops, because they barely have any velocity to begin with. And those guys, if they've gotten this far with below average velocity, it means they have great control. And that's, a precious commodity, especially in young pitchers, is a guy that can command the zone and throw strikes. And, what more do you really want out of a number 5 starter? Again, there's, assuming Pomeranz and Rodriguez are healthy, there's obviously no spot for Brian Johnson. But if I had to pick one guy to keep around, I would probably lean towards Brian Johnson. Plus, he's got youth on his side. What is he, 25?
Yeah. In terms of what you're getting out of him, I think you could get something, like you said, comparable to what Doug Fister gave you last year.
Right.
And, Doug Fister ended up starting a playoff game, so.
Right.
You look at the situation now, and you always think you have too much depth, but things happen. So
right.
we'll see how that shakes out. One good thing I'm gonna throw at you is, it's obviously, again, small sample size, but they didn't make an error in the first 5 games.
Right.
So defense hasn't sucked.
I think that was a huge concern entering the season.
And
was the infield defense.
Yeah. So you look and the advanced metrics aren't quite as favorable, but I thought that the defense, particularly the infield defense, had a possibility, and still has a possibility to be an unmitigated disaster because. Right. You look, and Devers is, you can question his defense for as good as he is offensively.
He double clutches every time he throws the ball.
Yeah, so that's a concern over a third. Eduardo Nunez, for as dynamic as he can be as a player, defense, and as versatile as he is, defense isn't exactly his strong suit.
And he's definitely, you can see it out there, he's lost range with that knee injury.
Yep.
He can't get to the same balls. Maybe as the season goes and he gets stronger, he will, but right now you can see that. To some extent, maybe it's not a pain thing, but he doesn't have the same range up the middle or towards first base that he had last season.
And then the double play partner, Xander Bogaerts, he's been, for as inconsistent as he's been offensively throughout his career so far, he's had some ups and downs defensively too. He's kind of had a similar trajectory in terms of, sometimes he looks like a guy that could thrust himself into the Gold Glove conversation with a little more development, and then other times he looks, just like a run-of-the-mill shortstop who's going to be more offensively minded.
Well, let's not forget, he did make an error last night. He didn't get credit for it because you can't assume a double play, but he made an error without getting credit for one. So, and you're right. He's up and down, and we'll see how it goes.
I just wanted to point that out though, because I just think that in the bullpen have the potential to derail this team more than anything.
Right.
And so far, so good, at least from a defensive standpoint.
To me, though, the biggest thing looking forward, as far as things that could derail them, I guess we'll get into this later. But for me, it's, can you score runs in big games against good pitchers? And that's ultimately, for me, I can live with bad defense. I've seen, bad Red Sox teams with bad defense win a lot of games. So for me, it still at the end of the day comes down to the pitching and the offense. But you're right, especially in terms of in the regular season, you can lose games on bad defense, and this could be a really close AL East race. And they could come down to a couple games you lost because of a bad play in the ninth or what it may be, a pass ball, who knows what. So you're right, to see them looking good on defense early on is encouraging, because throughout the course of a season, it can be important, sneaky important factor.
They could foresee a scenario where you have Rick Porcello pitching to contact and things get a little shaky in the infield.
We talked about Marcus Walden's play last night. Did you see that?
Marcus Walden. Let's not spend too much time on Marcus Walden.
He made a great play.
I mean, I love him, but
he made a great play on a grounder up the middle. I just want to give him a shout out.
All right, well,
great job at fielding your position, Marcus.
Excellent.
I think that's his first name.
Marcus, not Jordan Walden.
No, not Jordan.
Where is he these days?
I don't know.
Anyways, so we gave you the dessert, we gave you the good thing. Now we gotta force some veggies down your throat. What is one bad thing? What's one thing that you're a little skeptical about here?
I mean, again, I would say the offense's lack of production to the first 5 games, but I'm not prepared to go there yet because it's so early. So for me, it's the iffy bullpen, and how can you not be at least a little concerned until Carson Smith shows that he can lock down the 8th inning, and until Tyler Thornburg comes back and shows that he is all right and he can be the guy that he was when he was in Milwaukee. I mean, it's hard to be wholly confident that Matt Barnes, Joe Kelly, Bobby Pointer, and those guys can be effective bridges to Craig Kimbrell. They could, on some nights they could be, but they're at any point, any of those guys can lose the strike zone. And we've seen great things from all of them. I think, like you said, the long term, I think Matt Barnes is somebody that wore down last year. So maybe managing those guys' innings and having them fresh later in the season will be good, because we've seen great things in Barnes. We've seen Kelly be great. But
it feels like Matt Barnes pitched about 150 games last year.
It seemed like he was in every night. It was unbelievable.
Him and Heath Embry, every time, if you're out, there's just so many scenarios where I'd walk into a place with the Red Sox game on and look up and they were pitching.
and there's Heath Embry.
You got 1 or 2 guys like that every season.
Right. Yeah. There's Heath Embry throwing a slider just slightly outside the zone right. And a batter. Okay. But that's the one for me. Is the bullpen. And again, it's early. We'll see with the bullpen. I don't want to make a full assessment of the bullpen until June 1st. I feel like is a good cutoff.
That's fair. We won't ask you to.
Okay.
My one bad thing. It's not. I'm not too concerned about it, but I think it's interesting to note is Andrew BennettND getting off to a little bit of a sluggish start. He started the year 0 for 13 before finally getting a hit.
Infield hit at that.
Yeah,
so it doesn't count.
And so this is, I'm not gonna come right out and say this is the makings of a sophomore slump or anything, but I just think it's interesting because we even saw it last year. For as good as he was on the whole, I mean, I don't think anybody is disappointed at all by what they saw from BennettND last year. I think he showed flashes of being an all-star caliber player in this league, and for someone as young and inexperienced as he is, I think last season he pretty much, you look at his numbers, he gave you everything you could have asked for and more. So I don't have really any complaints about his production. However, he did show some signs of being streaky. There were some times he had the ebbs and flows of the season, if you will, and there were times when he was just seemed to be locked in, looked like that perennial all-star, and then there were other times where he looked like the young 23-year-old, 22 at the time, 23-year-old player, still kind of finding his way in the major leagues. And I think you just look at you look month by month at his averages last year. For April, March, 333. He came out red hot. And then as you progress through the season, 204, 295, 222, 333, and then 238 in September and October. So a wide range there.
Yeah, I mean, it went up, the spikes up, and goes down.
Up and down, and I just feel like that's something to just kind of keep an eye on, especially when you put that production alongside somebody like Jackie Bradley Jr., whose entire career has been kind of a roller coaster ride offensively.
Right.
So.
The reason I don't worry about BennettND and getting out to an early slump is because the guys that you worry about that could be streaky are the guys that you think maybe it gets in their head a little bit and they get down on themselves. And I think BennettND is a super confident guy. And I mean, we saw he was probably the best hitter for the team in the postseason 2 years ago. He got that big hit in Game 4 against the Astros last year, the big home run. So I think even if he gets in a slump, I don't think he's one of these guys that will let it snowball and become something way more extreme than it is. He strikes me as a guy that will work out of it and is talented enough to not let it become, a season-long kind of deal.
Yeah, well, and the thing with him too is it's so like he's so mechanically and fundamentally sound. If that's a way to put it, it's just he never looks like he's like uncomfortable at the plate. It's not like Xander Bogaerts, for instance, who goes through those struggles last season where it's pretty clear he's lunging at pitches.
Yep.
He's not driving the ball in the air. And
even Mookie Betts has those moments too.
Yeah, in Bradley, where you can see his swing gets incredibly long, and he just not really making the necessary adjustments. I don't really have those fears with BennettND. Like you said, he strikes me as a guy that just can kind of work his way out of it, and then when he does, he has the potential to kind of carry your offense a little bit. But
it is weird. He looks like a totally different dude out there right now without the hair.
He does, yeah.
I don't want to spend too much time on a guy's hair, but he does look like a completely different player. I mean, he's definitely bulked up.
Maybe this is the adjustment stage.
Right, because up until now, he's been the guy that, this little kid with long hair, skinny guy with a great swing. Now he's this like bulked up, buzz cut guy who's, 1 for 12?
Yeah,
so we'll
maybe
see.
You should grow it out a little bit. You can find a happy medium at some point in the middle of the season. Yeah, so that was just something that kind of stood out to me. I think, just a quick note. I mean, we look at the Yankees, and I think that, I think Aaron Judge is more prone to have a sophomore slump than Andrew BennettND. It kind of just random thought that I just am throwing out there at you, but just kind of based on what we just talked about with BennettND, I think he's more apt to work his way out of it.
Yeah, I don't know. I have a developing take that Aaron Judge is wildly overrated.
Yeah,
but,
well, I think you're.
I mean, the guy's great. Don't get me wrong, and he's gonna hit. I think he's gonna hit a ton of home runs. But I mean, what did he hit last year? Maybe by the end of the year, his average wasn't as high. But for a while there, he was like 340 with an absurd amount of home runs.
Then he went through a huge.
I mean, that's the
slump
best
and
player in the game
back.
type of numbers. And then he had a good September. I think he's somewhere in between. I don't know. And he when he was struggling last year, I mean, guys, pitchers identified the hole in his swing and they just attacked it. And I don't know if he ever really adjusted to it because it was a high fastball that he just wasn't able to get to, which is surprising considering how tall he is. And he turned it around in September. He wasn't that good in the playoffs. So I don't know. We'll see how Aaron Judge goes. But you're right. I feel like Aaron Judge is more prone to having a sophomore slump to me. So. Power guys, because he set the bar so high that it's going to be hard for him to reach it.
We shall see. All right, so now that we kind of assessed a little bit of good, a little bit of bad, a little bit in between, really covering all, I'd like to now toss it to our little chat with Tom Caron, NESN Zone.
Yeah, one of the NESN overlords.
TC was able to provide some excellent insight, particularly on Alex Cora, a guy that he is very familiar with from having covered him over the years, first as a player and now as the manager of the Red Sox. All right, we're pleased to be joined by NESN Zone Tom Caron. TC, first of all, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so we figured we'd bring you in, not because you always deliver the goods. We figured we'd bring you in on the inaugural episode of the 2018 NESN Red Sox Podcast. But also because you kind of have a unique perspective. We talk a lot about Alex Cora, obviously, in his first year as Red Sox manager. It's kind of I was interested to see what kind of vibe you're getting from this team in general. I mean, you've been around this team for a number of years now, been around several teams in years past, been up close with this team in particular. What is it about this group that has kind of stood out to you throughout spring training and now over the course of the first few days of the season?
I think it was Brian Cashman, the Yankees general manager, who I first heard use the word connectivity when he talked about why he brought in Aaron Boone, a younger guy. And I think that's exactly the word that struck me at spring training with Alex Cora. I think he is relating to the young players. I'm not sure he's doing those Fortnite dances with them, but he's connecting with them in a way that John Farrell just couldn't. And maybe it's a generational thing. Maybe it's because this team is younger than a lot of teams. But I just saw kind of a freedom and a joy coming out in Xander Bogaerts and Mookie Betts and Christian Vasquez and BennettND and Devers and all these young guys that I didn't see before. And I think it's because, not just because Alex is younger, but because he just played the game recently. It's almost like one of your teammates has become your manager. I think he understands them. I think the way he's used the bench early on, by the fourth game, all 25 guys had gotten on the field. Right. You never saw that in the past. And so I just think that the start of this season has kind of extended what I saw at spring training, which he's just lightened up the entire atmosphere around the team.
We mentioned this in talking on the podcast about that maybe, to go off your point about using all these bench guys, Alex Cora having been in that role as a player, playing all over the diamond, being the guy that kind of stepped in when a star player needed a day off. Do you think he kind of has, I don't want to say a soft spot for maybe a utility guy, but understands the importance of bench players in having to use all 25 guys as opposed to relying on your stars?
Yeah, I think understanding is the right word, because he was that guy. Before they traded Devin Marrero a couple weeks ago, Brock Holt was starting to really worry about where he fit in on this team. And he went in and talked to Cora about it. And I talked to Alex afterwards, and Cora said, listen, I was that guy. That was my life for most of my major league career. So I don't know about a soft spot. I don't think he's going to put role players into position just because they're role players. But I think he understands how to keep those guys motivated, how to utilize them, how to maximize their potential. And so I do think, listen, more than anything, he was the bench coach in Houston. They used everybody, right? They only had 2 guys play 150 games last year. They only had 3 guys total play 140 games in Houston last year. They used, and they won the World Series. So I think he saw that and said, you know what? I'm going to get these guys off their feet a little bit earlier. I'm going to help them be more fresh in September when we need it.
I'm wondering if you can recall what it was like to cover Cora as a player. Like a lot of his former teammates have said they kind of saw him becoming a manager. They saw it coming down the road. Did you get that sense when you watched him, that this was a guy that was kind of destined to be a manager in the big leagues? Yeah,
totally. In fact, it was pretty funny. I remember him saying to us at one point along the way, 07 or 08 or something, he's like, I wish people would stop telling me I'm going to be a manager. It's like they're trying to get me out of the game now. He's like, Terry Francona's always telling me I'm going to be a great manager. Well, I'd like to keep playing for a while. And so that was always kind of around it. He always had that brain for the game. His brother Joey, same way. He's a coach in Pittsburgh. He saw the game in ways that a lot of guys didn't. And the great example, of course, is 07 when he was hitting like 400-something in April. Yeah. And rookie Dustin Pedroia was hitting 161, right? And it was Alex Cora who said, listen, the second baseman of the future of the Red Sox is Dustin Pedroia. I'm doing great, that's great. But he knew that Pedroia was going to be the guy every day. And I think when he said that, when he talked to Pedroia about that, it really helped Pedroia relax and play the game. And when you see a guy like that, not trying to hang on to his job, but observing what's happening with his teammates, that's when you know he sees the game at a different level.
Great. And I'm just wondering also, do you have anybody on the current team that you think the same about that could be a manager down the road? A lot of young guys.
It's a tough question.
Well, catcher, you always start with catchers, right? Because catchers see the game and
Well, when you said about almost forcing a guy out of the game, I feel like that was the case with David Ross for a while. It was like everybody's like, oh, this guy's going to be a manager.
because we all knew he was going to be dancing with the network stars. We all said we got to get this guy in ballet slippers and get him off the field. But catchers always see the game. I think Christian Vasquez is the first guy that would pop to mind because the way he's hitting, he can understand the offense, but also the pitching part of it, which is what the catchers get that not everybody. Problem is with today's play, they make too damn much money. Right. You know what I mean? Who's going to go sit on a bus in AA and learn how to manage when you've got $90 million in the bank? That's why a lot of them don't. That's why a lot of them slum with me on TV. They want to do something and they don't want to jump in every day. But as far as guys who see the game and understand it, I think Vasquez is certainly a place you would start. I think a guy like Mitch Moreland. Who's battled through some things to be where he is in the game. I would see him as a guy who understands the game. I think those are probably the best places. So I'll go with those two guys. Okay. How's that?
Speaking of yucking it up with you on TV, John Farrell, he has a new job now.
Yeah, we all saw that coming. He was so relaxed and engaging in his post-game press conferences.
It's just so enlightening.
Listen, I saw the other side of John. It doesn't surprise me. He's a brilliant guy. He really does know the game, and he's actually got a great sense of humor. At the end, obviously, that got hidden far, far away from the public eye, and so it doesn't surprise me that he's been a hit. I thought he was really good Sunday night. I thought he was engaging and funny, and I wish we'd have seen more of that from him as manager. I think that would have changed the perception of who he is.
Cool. All right, TC, we won't ask you when you're going to be on Dancing with the Stars. We'll play that one.
Yeah, that'll be Hell Freezes Over. Yeah, no, that's it. Well, I'm a 50-something-year-old white guy from Maine. Okay, the last guy they ever want to see dancing with anybody. Okay.
All right, TC, thanks for joining us.
Cool.
Thanks, guys.
All right, Dakota. Let's here's what we're gonna do. We play a little fill in the blank.
Okay.
We mentioned at the top that we're kind of taking a bigger picture approach to this, the inaugural edition of the 2008 NESN Red Sox Podcast. So I'd like to just kind of, I'll give you a sentence, and you can just tell me how you, who or how.
Let's do this rapid fire. Let's avoid Marlins tangents.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at here. Is I'm just going to give you a sentence, and I want you to fill it in for me.
Okay.
Most of which, all of which, really, focus on the bigger picture for this season. So, the player on the Red Sox with the most to prove this season is
Xander Bogaerts. For me,
Okay.
absolutely. Is this the guy that we heard about when he was coming up through the minors that is a 300 hitter that can hit 30 home runs, be a franchise shortstop? Or is this a guy that hits 260 with 10 home runs and isn't worthy of the massive Scott Boras contract he's going to be trying to get when he's a free agent? He's got a lot to prove, not just to the Red Sox, but to himself, because, if he has a big year this year, he's setting himself up for a huge payday. And if he has a huge year, that is enormous for the Red Sox. Because I think everybody looks at Bogaerts and they know how good he is, but I think everyone can agree he hasn't totally delivered or realized the huge potential that everyone thinks he has. He's off to a good start this year, but for me, he definitely has the most to prove.
All right, I'm going to go with, I'm going to say Eduardo Rodriguez. I'm going to take a guy who hasn't even stepped on the mound yet, but who figures to be a big part of this rotation when he does come back. And it's because we are still figuring out what this guy is. And it feels like we've been doing this for a very long time now, Dakota.
When did they get him? What year was that? The trade for Andrew Miller of the Orioles?
That was 14. So
this is year 4.
This is year 4 of the Eduardo Rodriguez era, and we are still figuring out what exactly is this guy's ceiling. What can you reasonably expect?
This is year 4 of the Erod identity crisis.
Yes, and so I just think we're reaching a point here where it's crapping it off the pot, I guess is the way to put it. Mainly because if he's pitching at, I don't think anybody is going to doubt how good he has the potential to be, and if he's pitching at that level, and you slide him in between, after the big three of Sale, Price, and Porcello, all of whom can, pitch at a high level, then you're talking about a rotation that has, the makings to be one of the best in the American League, one of the best across baseball. But I'm just not sure what this guy is yet. And one thing I do want to say though is let's stop saying he's a potential ace.
No, he's definitely not that.
Because there are people that's still out there who believe that he has it could evolve into this _1 starter, and I'm just not seeing that. There's too much. He would have done that by now. Obviously the injuries have played a huge part.
I just don't know if he has the mentality,
in stopping.
Ace,
yeah. It's just he came
up.
He had that prospect hype, I guess, that every prospect seems to get nowadays.
When he had those first few games where he had 7 innings with no runs against the Rangers and then somebody else.
It's clear that this guy is a legitimate major league pitcher. I think he's a guy that can thrive and be a good starter in this league. I think he could be, ideal scenario I think for Eduardo Rodriguez is he is a good number 3, number 4 starter. Number 4 starter with a ceiling of, a number 3 type guy. He's not an ace, so stop saying that. But I just think that they're getting to a point they need to figure out what this guy is, because not only does it dictate could it dictate how far they go this season, but this has pretty big implications beyond this season. You start to look at, when Drew Pomeranz becomes a free agent, and assuming he leaves, you get the sales situation that you have to figure out.
Price could opt out. All these guys.
Price could opt out. So there are questions in that rotation beyond this season. And if you have Eduardo Rodriguez, if you know what he is, you finally can kind of pencil that in of what he is moving forward. I think that helps you, like I said, not only on the field this season, but as you start to map out your future. So a lot to prove for him, and it just feels like we've been doing this for a while.
Right.
And it's tough to hold it against him because the injuries have played so much of a factor. But when he comes back, this is kind of a make or break season for him, I would say.
I think your assessment that he could be like a number 4 starter is a bit low. I think 3 is appropriate, and I think he's a guy that at some point in his career, maybe it's this year, maybe it's next year, could pitch like a number 2 starter. He's one of those guys that'll always hover around 3 or so, like a middle rotation, and then sprinkle in like, oh wow, he had this all-star year, but it's not the norm.
See, I'm thinking like number 3 starter on a first division team. So, I want 2 guys ahead of him in my rotation if I'm planning on contending for a World Series.
Do you think?
I think he could go elsewhere, and if he's playing for the Marlins, he's their number 1 right out of the gate. And I think it obviously depends on the talent around him. But if I'm the Red Sox, I don't want him being any more than my number 3.
Yeah, and I
think 3 or number 4, right smack dab in the middle.
I think for me, the biggest comp I can think of for Eduardo Rodriguez, and it's not. I mean, they're such different pitchers and personalities, but I can't help but go back to Clay Buchholz, because I just wonder if is this going to be a guy that we always go, man, what he could have been if he could have just stayed on the field or figured it out or developed some sort of consistency.
And you're still going to get the flashes of brilliance throughout it all.
Exactly, and obviously completely different pitchers, but do you want, what you're always asking, is this a guy that we can rely on? And the answer ultimately always ended up being no on Clay Buchholz. And you wonder how long do you wait for a guy like Eduardo Rodriguez to answer that question?
I think it's a fair comparison because you figure, ideally you had John Lester, John Lackey, Clay Buchholz, the number 3 guy. I think just moving forward, that's maybe best case scenario.
Right. When you strip away some of the optics of it, like Clay Buchholz was an easy target just because his demeanor and his look on the mound and his greasy hair. But if you strip away some of the optics of it and just is this a guy a guy that has a high ceiling but isn't reliable and gets banged up? Do you bank on that guy going forward? And that's why, like you said, this is a huge season for him because he could answer that question this year if he goes out and pitches well all year.
So there we go. We got those are our guys. Didn't even mention David Price, who I think we can just assume is kind of on a whole different level in terms of having to prove himself or wanting to prove himself.
Yeah, but again, I think his thing with the most to prove is in the postseason.
True.
Yeah, I think for him, everybody knows what David Price is, and they know what he's not. I think for him, his time to prove what he is in the playoffs. So.
All right, let's move through this. That wasn't exactly rapid fire on our part, but so we'll pick it up here a little bit. Blank is the X factor that no one is talking about.
Rick Porcello.
Okay.
For me, let's assume that Chris Sale is great again, and for the sake of argument, let's say that David Price is at the level or higher than he was in his first year with the Red Sox, which is a number 1, number 2 starter. That if Rick Porcello can go out and not have a Cy Young year, but let's say you get 15, 16 wins and a mid-3 ERA out of Rick Porcello, and your top 3 starters are like that, that makes you really hard to beat.
Gas.
And and the thing is, the season often comes down to it's about pitching, and if you have 3 starters, if you throw out those guys in a 3-game series or 4-game series, it's going to be really hard to lose, to lose a lot of games, and that type of starting pitching could lead you to a division title, which nobody wants to be in that wild card game. So I think Rick Porcello, if he returns to not the Cy Young form but close to it, that's huge.
I'm going to say a guy that we touched on before, Tyler Thornburg, and his, hopefully eventual return here.
Sounds like it's going to be in a month. That's the word.
Could be,
but
this has been a very volatile and unpredictable situation all along.
Yeah.
But at some point they figure to get this guy back, and I think it's easy to lose track of just how good he was in Milwaukee leading up to the trade. I mean, this guy immediately when they got him, I loved the trade at the beginning. I mean, now knowing what Travis Shaw has become, I never really saw that coming in Milwaukee. But
right, I agree. Mauricio Dubon's kind of fallen off.
Yeah, so I just look at Thornburg, and I think if he pitches, this, as well as he can, this is a guy who struck out more than 12 batters per 9 innings in 2016. I just think he could be kind of the the equivalent of adding Addison Reed last year. I mean, you're not going to have to give up anything, obviously, in this instance, but has the potential to stabilize that bullpen, which we've mentioned several times could be the biggest concern for this team. I just think if you have Thornburg, I can't even say this guy's name, firing on all cylinders, and Carson Smith, shows what he's capable of doing. If you got Thornburg, Smith leading up to Kimbrel, I think that bullpen, the whole dynamic of the bullpen changes. Because that bridge, that 7th, 8th inning bridge to Kimbrel is so essential. And right now they're at the point where guys' roles aren't really defined and they're mixing and matching. But I think the highest upside and the best possibility for a situation leading up to Kimbrel is the Thornburg-Smith combo. I think those guys have the highest potential of anybody in that bullpen. And if everybody's pitching up to their capabilities, then you start talking about a bullpen that could rival the Yankees, where I think that's the one area where the Yankees have a distinct advantage. Very deep bullpen.
I think that bullpen is so overrated. But
Really?
That's just me.
See, I think that
how many times have you seen Betances crap himself?
Yeah.
I do not think that guy, and we've seen Chapman do it too. I mean, Chapman's great, but I mean, I don't look at Chapman and think he's unbeatable. I know he throws hard. I look at Betances. The Red Sox have always had good success against him. I mean, everybody's seen David Robertson. There's no mystery there. Tommy Canley did nothing when he came over last season.
I like Canley a lot, but
I mean, I look at that bullpen, and I mean, I think it's one of those things where it looks good on paper, but I don't know. I've never been one of those people that's like, oh man, the Yankees bullpen. You better get to them in the first 6 innings, because if you don't, you're done.
So, well, right now I think there's a pretty sizable discrepancy between the two bullpens, and I just think that if you get Thornburg back, in conjunction with Smith pitching the way they kind of envisioned when they traded for him, then you're talking about not quite as much of a difference between the two units. So Thornburg's eventual return for me is an X factor that's kind of been swept under the rug, but you just don't really hear about it too much, because I think at this point it's just you just kind of have to progress without him, and then when he comes back, he comes back.
Right.
It's really hard to expect anything.
Yeah.
All right, so my random bold prediction for 2018 is, why don't I start this one off?
Okay. My random bold prediction. Oh, you want to start?
Yeah,
okay.
I'll start.
All right, go.
I'd say Christian Vasquez will be an all-star.
Disagree, but that's great. That's a good prediction.
This is, and I'll admit, a lot of it is due to the volatility of the catching position offensively year over year. I mean, Gary Sanchez, I think, is a pretty good pick to be
but there has to be a backup.
The starter.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, I don't see any reason why Vasquez can't slide in there. I think we all know what he is defensively. Really, the thing that could end up holding him back from getting an all-star nod, in my opinion, is playing time. How much they divide up the time between him and Sandy Leon,
or him and Swihart,
or if Swihart eventually evolves into, if they start giving him a lot of playing time behind the plate, we'll see how that shakes out. But I think just beyond Sanchez, there's an opportunity there for somebody to step up with Salvador Perez on the shelf. So maybe Vasquez slides in the role. I think they gotta start taking notice of what this guy means defensively, and I think he's better offensively than he gets credit for. He showed that at times last season. I just like his approach. He uses the opposite field very well, and it's a pretty decent sample size. He's a good hitter in the minors. Not great, but
I think he's good enough on offense as a catcher. He's fine. I don't think he's a detriment. He can hit.
He's not going to follow the every year you get the Yadier Molina comparisons. He's never going to follow in that trajectory in terms of offensive skill. At least I don't think. Didn't really see it coming from Molina either. But I think there's still room for some offensive growth to go along with his defense. So
and I know he's talked about how he just doesn't view himself as ever hitting a lot of home runs. I don't know. I think there's more power in that.
I think there's still. Yeah, I think he's got some sneaky power. And
I think there's a 20-homer season in Christian Vasquez's bat. Someday, not this season. I think it's.
We've seen when he gets a hold of it, he gets a hold of it.
Right, and when he hits them, they're bombs.
Yeah, so there is some untapped power there, and it's kind of, to this point at least, seems like just kind of a matter of putting it all together because he uses the opposite field well. Maybe if he starts, Tim Myers can crack into some of that offensive upside. So that's my random prediction.
Okay, mine is that Hanley Ramirez will hit more home runs this season than Giancarlo Stanton.
Okay.
All right. Listen, and Hanley Ramirez, I believe, has only had 100 season. I think that came a couple years ago for the Red Sox. So this,
So are you banking on Stanton
I'm banking on
tearing his hamstring.
I'm banking on Stanton regressing to what I consider the norm for his career. This is Stanton's home run totals for his career every season beginning in 2010. 22, 34, 37, 24, 37, 27, 27, and then obviously the albatross last year, 59. I'm throwing that out because that was just ridiculous. I mean, maybe he does it again and proves me wrong. He he definitely could. But I look at Stanton, every year he has some sort of injury that, for the most part shelves him for, 20 or so games, and he loses some home runs because of that. I could see Giancarlo Stanton getting somewhere between, like 25 and 33 home runs. And because of that, I think if JD Martinez hits and, suddenly Hanley gets more balls to hit, I could see Hanley getting into like 35 this year and just edging out Stanton a little bit. Everyone thinks Stan's going to come in and hit 65 bombs at Yankee Stadium because it's a launching pad, and that could prove true. That's why it's a bold prediction.
I think you're nuts.
All right, we'll see.
It's quite bold.
He's hit under 30 home runs 4 times in his career. So that's like half his seasons.
I mean,
half his seasons.
It's a tough prediction 30. Because so much of it is predicated on health.
Not to mention, in his batting averages, 259, 260, 290, 249, 288.
No, listen, I agree. Hitter. I actually agree with you to an extent that I think Stanton is slightly overrated. At least I felt strongly about this going into last season. Last season, it's tough to come away from last season and feel like still overrated.
But it's hard coming away from Brady Anderson's big year.
But too. I do think that last season might be a little bit of an aberration. I think his stock is as high as it's ever been. I don't think he's going to replicate that.
And he's in it on a team with no pressure. I mean, we'll see what he does in New York.
But saying Hanley's going to hit more than him, you're going out on a limb that I'm not ready to venture out on there.
Believe in Hanley.
I got you back on a lot of things.
There's 35
that's not
in
one
that
of them.
bat.
All right, moving along. Fix up this sentence for me. Red Sox will or will not win the AL East because.
Wait, so repeat it. They will or will not. They will win or will.
Do you think they're going to win the AL East? And if you don't,
I say the Red
Sox. What's the problem? Why are they going to win?
I say they will win. My firm belief is that they will win because of starting pitching. I think they have the better pitching all around than the Yankees. And as I said before, I'm not totally scared about the Yankees bullpen. I think the Red Sox have a team built for a regular season. Whether or not they have one built for the playoffs remains to be seen. But I think they have the pitching and good enough hitters to get through the regular season and win 94, 95 games. I think the Yankees starting pitching will crack at some point. If I'm going to make an argument for why they won't, it's simply because, I don't know if they can score enough runs in big games. When push comes to shove in those big games, you got to win. Late August night in New York, you're in Toronto in a close game. Can you get a big hit off a good pitcher? There's still questions about that with this team. But at the end of the day, if the starting pitching stays healthy, I think the Sox win the division.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Red Sox do win the AL East, and I do think it is because that rotation I think is the clear advantage over really everybody else in that division, the Yankees included. I think the Yankees grab one of the wild card spots and probably win that game. Although it's kind of a crapshoot, the one game deal. But I just think that the Red Sox rotation is far better than the Yankees at this point, and I just think there's a lot more room for growth. The Yankees obviously have an excellent nucleus as well, a stacked farm system, but as we mentioned, there's no way you're going to get the Aaron Judge performance that you got last season. So in some ways, there are certain players on that team I think maxed out a little bit last year.
Right.
So,
and everyone's
the Red Sox,
Greg Bird, and he's hurt again too.
Yeah. So I just feel like with the Red Sox, you have someone like Rafael Devers who could take a huge step forward. You're going to have him for the entire season, and he could be just a force offensively. There's still room for growth with BennettND, who we touched on. So Bogart's coming back, bouncing back after a lackluster season last year. So I think it's just a lot of things that you can look at on the Red Sox, and they can go the other way. It could, you could be relying on a lot of wild cards that ultimately prove to your detriment. But I just feel like there's a lot of room for growth there, and ultimately the rotation will be too much. So I like them to win the AL East. However, I'm not sure I like their chances of getting out of the American League and going to the World Series, because I look at Houston, I look at Cleveland. I still think those two teams are the cream of the crop. I actually like the Indians this year. I think that rotation is just stacked.
Yeah, agreed. I think it's their time too.
So I think the Red Sox win the AL East. I think they win a series this year. I think they get to the ALCS, and that might ultimately be when, if you're going up against a team like either the Astros or the Indians, whose rotations kind of surpass that of the Red Sox. I think that's when you run into problems.
Right. I think the Red Sox chances of winning the World Series are slightly better than they were last year. They're decent.
Yeah.
I think they're a team that, if everything breaks for them, meaning, the starting pitching stays healthy, the guys emerge in the late innings of the bullpen to solidify those roles, and JD Martinez hits, I think it's a team that could, they could win the World Series, but they should not be the favorite. I think they're clearly behind the Indians and the Astros. But I think they're right there. They should be considered the third or fourth best team in the American League, and we've seen teams with, similarly ranked teams win it all. We've seen wild card teams win it all. So it shouldn't surprise you if they win it. But at the same time, I wouldn't expect it. I wouldn't go in this season thinking World Series or bust. That's an unfair expectation.
Right.
But don't be surprised if they go on a run.
All right. Well, we'll get out of here in a minute. I do want to just kind of touch on the league as a whole. Just we'll kind of just to bring everything together, tie everything together over the first week or so of the regular season. Is there anything that stood out for you across the league? I mean, we'll touch them all here. 4 things we'll touch on. One for each base, one for each bag here. First base, second base, third base, home plate. What stood out to you? Anything in particular?
We could fill almost all those bases with the rookie managers that had questionable beginnings to their careers. We didn't really get into Cora's bullpen moves too much. I think there were some questionable decisions that he made that you could second guess during the first week. I think a lot of that you can attribute to maybe he just, he doesn't know his guys that well yet. And as the season goes, I think he'll get a better handle for it. But, all three, him, Gabe Kapler with the Phillies, and Aaron Boone with the Yankees, all three of them are rookie managers, and all three had, up and down beginnings to their careers.
Yeah, that Gabe Kapler situation.
I mean, the Gabe Kapler thing, 21
something.
pitchers in 28 innings is unreal. I mean, I think he came out today and said fans have a right to be mad, so at least he's owning it. Aaron Boone didn't have a good weekend. I don't know if you saw it, but there was that game where he elected to intentionally walk Josh Donaldson, who'd been struggling, to set up in a bat. It was David Robinson versus Justin Smoke. Smoke had hit a 2-run home run the previous inning. Donaldson's clearly struggling. He walks the bases to get to Smoke. It's a grand slam and wins it.
Yeah.
And he had a similar bad decision with leaving Betances in for an extra inning, who then gave up a few runs. So, I think, maybe those guys are just searching a little bit.
Yeah,
maybe it's trying too hard. Maybe it's just searching. Expect water to find its level a little bit with them. But either way, rookie managers, kind of a tough debut.
Yeah, I'm all for, trying to be on the cutting edge here, so to speak, and trying to find ways to gain an edge, and whether it's taking a guy out before he goes to the third time through a lineup, or just really how you manage your pitching staff in general. I'm all for that, but not at the expense of common sense.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just,
the Kapler thing is inexcusable.
Sometimes I think that, particularly the young guys, a guy like Gabe Kapler, you get so caught up in trying to play the numbers and things like that, which again I'm all for, but that you throw conventional wisdom and just a level-headed rationale out the window. So that's my takeaway, I guess. It's just that if you're gonna sprinkle in your analytics and what have you, just use a little common sense too.
Yeah, don't make it don't make it all about you.
Exactly.
Manage the team.
I do want to get your thoughts real quick on Shohei Ohtani. Ohtani coming off one star with the Angels so far. He's been in the lineup, two-way guy, next Babe Ruth, whatever. What do you think of him? How's this gonna go?
I think what we can realistically expect is I think he'll have a decent year as a pitcher. I think everyone sort of agrees that his arm is ahead of his bat. What I can say is that I hope the Angels don't give up on him as a hitter. Let him have his lumps. I'm not saying, if he struggles, you have to keep him in the lineup every day. But, let the guy figure out Major League pitching a little bit. Let him hit, because I just think it would be fascinating to watch him play. And to see if he can pull this off. There's a reason no one's ever done it. It's extremely difficult. He's definitely got the stuff to be a big league pitcher. Jury's out on his bat. Early returns aren't that great. But all I can say is I hope the Angels don't ditch the plan. Let him figure it out.
I agree with you from an entertainment value standpoint. I want to see what this is all about. I want to see if this guy can actually pull it off. But
baseball needs it.
At the same time, I think he has absolutely no chance of pulling it off. I think that the Angels, as long as they prolong this, are doing nothing but hurting themselves. I think the sooner they scrap him as a hitter and focus on him entirely as a pitcher will be the best case scenario for them. This is a team that has aspirations of playing into October. I think what we saw from the first start was encouraging. I think Ohtani could be a very good front of the line starter. I think this guy looks legit as a pitcher, and therefore I would want to focus all my attention on making him the best pitcher possible and not screwing around with him getting X amount of at-bats a week or whatever it is, because I just think that I don't think he's going to be good enough to justify it as a hitter. I think you can find that production.
We don't know that. I mean,
I think you can find his offensive production. What he's ultimately going to give you offensively, I think you can find that from someplace else. And so why don't you just get that from someplace else and stop screwing around with him as a pitcher? It just doesn't make any sense to me. This is me not putting a lot of stock into how good he could be offensively.
Well, but I mean, at the end of the day, what do the Angels have to lose? This isn't like putting up this huge.
What if he?
They didn't sign him to this huge
What if
contract.
he gets beamed on the hand hitting?
What is it?
What if he hits like a $180, takes a fastball off the hand, and now you're losing your ace or your number 2 starter or whatever? Because I think he could be a really good starter in this league. But now you're screwing around, slapping him in the box when he's hitting a $160 and he gets drilled on the hand, and all of a sudden you lose your ace for production you could have got from another player.
I don't know, because I just think it's worth the risk. I mean, they have to look at it from a culture standpoint too. I mean, if this guy pulls it off, I mean, baseball.
I want to win games.
See, I do too, but I think baseball's in a spot right now where it's struggling. For star power to have something to really draw people in, and they only spend $12 million on this guy. See what you got. Give him a chance. I mean, if he takes a ball off the hand and it all goes to hell, I mean that sucks. But you didn't spend too much money on
20 games. I think there's enough star power for you.
I don't know.
I don't think you need to hit 20 home runs to go with it.
If other people win 20 games, I think if you got a guy that's doing both of those, I don't know. I would take a shot with him then, because if I'm them, because if he pulls it off, I mean that franchise, takes off. I mean, everything changes.
At the same time, if he doesn't pull it off, this could be a colossal mismanagement on their part.
Of $12 million.
So, anyway.
Which is nothing.
I'll move along real quick. The weather's been doing some weird crap around in New England, New York. Just the weather's friggin' weird, man. I don't know how else to say it. Weather's nuts. I mean, you.
Yeah, I'm from central New Hampshire.
More than anybody.
It's terrible. Yeah.
So, should they start the season later? Whenever you get snow out, I start to think, what are we doing here? Should we, especially with this year starting in March?
Here's my thing. So people would say if you start the season later, then you go later in November, where there's also a risk of snow and it being too cold. So ultimately, what do you gain? What I say is start the season a week or 2 later, and baseball purists be damned. Let's cut 10 games off the schedule.
I'm cutting more than 10.
I mean, right.
I am cutting more than 10. I am starting.
Do we need 162 to figure out who's
spring training's way too long. I'm cutting down the season. I'm cutting down spring training. The game schedule of spring training drives me nuts.
Right.
Because now we're getting to a point where your starters aren't even making their first spring training start until towards the tail end of spring.
Right.
So you're getting this ragtag bunch out there for the majority of the time. Spring training never has really been of any interest in terms of, winning games or whatever. But now you're getting real diluted product. There's nobody out there because everybody's more focused on working on the side, especially starting pitchers. So I think spring training, do whatever you want with that. Cut down the game schedule, and also, I have no problem starting the baseball season in mid-late April.
I think
or
mid-April
whatever.
is great.
There's so much going on right now, anyways.
Yeah.
The NHL playoffs,
and
NBA
that's the thing too,
playoffs.
is that no one cares about I don't want to say no one cares, but it's really hard for baseball to leave a mark in early April when you're competing with the NBA and NHL playoffs.
Yeah.
And obviously those.
But then
playoffs
if you
go
come in
till
and you
June.
hit the ground running towards the tail end of April,
right?
I think you build up a solid foundation that way.
Because I think a lot of people, especially in the East, a lot of people aren't. They're ready for it to be warm. They want it to be warm, but there's a lot of people just aren't quite ready for baseball, especially. With all the other sports on this side of the country, and and how much people care, it's just I don't know. I don't think people are totally ready to embrace baseball until like you said, mid-April or so. And then you can hit the ground running. A lot of people, their favorite team is eliminated from the NHL, NBA playoffs. They can move on to baseball. Football's more in the rear view.
you know,
baseball just gets lost at this part of the season when they start. No one's paying attention.
Length of games, too many games. 2 issues I have with baseball. Another one I have is unwritten rules. And just how baseball, more than any other sport, is just so just over the top with trying to preserve this weird tradition, or it's just weird.
They have more than any other sport. I mean, basketball has its own where, don't run up the score, or if we're running out the clock or conceding a turnover when we're up 20, don't then take the ball and go score. But that's one.
Major League Baseball has way too many idiosyncrasies, and I mention this because there was a situation in the Orioles-Twins game in the first week where a guy Chance Cisco. Not to be confused with the silver-haired thong song producer or singer.
Who now looks like Francisco Lindor.
He spells it different. He dropped down a bunt in a one-hitter against Jose Berrios. It caused a little bit of a stir. The Twins took exception to it. Really, it was just baseball being baseball, man. It was stupid.
Especially in that situation.
I have no problem with that.
No.
Whatever.
A one-hitter especially, I mean, and the thing was he was batting, he was trying to drop it down away from the shift. I mean, you asked for it. If you're going to shift on a guy like that, I mean, he should try and bunt it there.
I agree 100%.
I understand to a certain extent. The only one I can understand is if it's a no-hitter, and let's say it's in the 9th inning, the guy's mowing people down, and someone drops a little squib bunt. I mean, at the end of the day, I wouldn't have an issue with it. It's a little weaselly, but stuff like this.
It's weaselly, but
and the bat, people getting worried about the bat flips and stuff. All that stuff is fine. I don't understand why anybody cares. The only one I get is a no-hitter, and a guy tries to sneak down some stupid bunt because he can't hit him. That's a little weird, but at the end of the day, it's not something to get up in arms about.
Yeah,
you don't need by the guy.
You don't need some guy then after the game who's in his 10th or 11th season or whatever talking about how the young guy doesn't know the game and doesn't know the unwritten rules and crap. It's like, get off your high horse, dude. Just being very insufferable right now.
Baseball does itself no favors with that kind of stuff.
No, it's tough, man.
Yeah.
It's tough to listen to and not get a little annoyed, but I wanted to touch on that. Those are just some topics I figured we'd breeze around before we get out of here.
I want to make before we go. I want to make one special note to.
You got a shout out?
Yeah, I want to congratulate Red Sox legend Stephen Drew on a fantastic career. I mean, this is a 250 hitter. I think he had 121 home runs, 500 RBI over 12 seasons.
Stephen Drew. I tell you what.
Red Sox, great. He had a big home run in the World Series, and he had a fantastic career.
I was in the bulk of my covering the Red Sox on the Red Sox beat. Did 3 seasons, 13, 14, and 15 out there at Fenway.
That's some time.
Every home game, and
slinging the mud.
So I know all too well how polarizing a figure Stephen Drew was amongst the Red Sox fans.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, Stephen Drew retired or announced his retirement on Monday. He last played for the Nationals last season, and he gone.
All right.
He's out of here.
Well, so we will dedicate this to Stephen Drew.
Yeah.
Hopefully he gets a chance to listen. If not, hopefully you get a chance to listen to us in the future going throughout this season, because we will be back quite frequently with our Red Sox / MLB thoughts.
Look forward to great guests
here. And yes, we thank TC for coming on. Obviously, you can catch up with him on Twitter. Good follow. You can follow us as well if you'd like. I'm at the Ricky Doyle. Dakota, where you stationed?
I'm at Dak Randall, DAKRAN.
So go right ahead. Give us a follow. Tune in next time. And follow NESN.com for all your Red Sox, MLB, and just general sports needs, because we will be here. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
All right. Thank you.
Later.